Michael Moore, it's May 2011. You have a book coming out in September 2011. It doesn't have a name.
It does as of this morning.
What is its name?
It's called Here Comes Trouble.
Here Comes Trouble. Why did you come up with that title?
These are stories. They're short stories that I've written, but they're nonfiction short stories. So they're stories from my life, and I've written a couple of dozen stories about the years before people knew who I was, before my first film. So these are from when I was a small child all the way through my 20s, and it sort of shows how I ended up like this. And I believe the book cover is going to have, I saw a picture of it here today. I don't know if they've got it, a picture of me as a 2-year-old. And then across the top it says, Here Comes Trouble.
Were you trouble as a 2-year-old, a 10-year-old?
No, I was, well, not trouble as in getting in trouble. But my parents did things to me that caused trouble. Like my mom taught me to read and to write when I was 4 years old. This is a dangerous thing to learn how to read at an early age. And so when I went to school, in first grade, whatever, I was already reading books, and I'm having to sit there singing along to A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And it's like, and you learn this very early on as a child. The other kids are not going to like you if you're a little, too smart. So I had to kind of fake like I was trying to remember the letters, A, B, C, D, so they'd like me. And I would come home and I was so bored with school, and it was like, why did you teach me how to read and write so early? And the nuns, I went to a Catholic school, the nuns saw this, and so they one day just decided to skip me. I was in first grade, and they just moved me up to second grade. I came home all excited, and Mom, I'm in second grade. No, you're not. She got on the phone and called the Mother Superior. I want him with children his own age, don't move him up a grade. And the next day I had to go, I got moved back. And then I was just bored through most of school. So what does a child do when he's bored but, cause trouble? So,
who were or are your parents?
My mother, her name was Veronica Moore. She passed away in 2002. A wonderful, great mother to have. I write about her in the book. My dad is still with us. He is turning 90 this summer. His name is Frank Moore. Grew up on the east side of Flint. Comes from both my parents are Irish Catholic families. And my mom's family actually were pioneers in the area. They first came there in the 1830s in Michigan, which was all wilderness then. And then my dad's family, they all worked in the factories of Flint and all that. So they've both been great influences on me, and I've been very fortunate to have them.
How often do you get back to Flint?
Oh, I'm there every month. I live north of Flint, up in northern Michigan. So my dad still lives down in Flint, and I'm down there once or twice a month, spending a number of days with him there. He still drives and goes to mass every day, goes to the gym. Clearly I didn't obey him on that level, but no, I'm in Flint quite a bit, and of course all my friends are still there. So,
politically active family?
I wouldn't say politically aware. One of the first things I remember is my parents debating Kennedy and Nixon, and my mom was for Nixon and my dad was for Kennedy. And I can remember them out in the garage, putting away some boxes or whatever and having this political debate. And my dad being appalled because we're Catholic, how could you not vote for, this is going to be our first Catholic president. But my mom's family, her dad was the head of the Republican Party in the area in the early part of the 20th century. And Republicans back then, they were, when they said conservative, they meant don't spend money you don't have. Not a bad idea. Conserve the air, conserve the water, the gifts that God gave us, this earth. And of course they were the party of Lincoln. They were very much against slavery and against discrimination and all that. So I had that kind of Republican mother and a father who was a hardcore Roosevelt Democrat.
What about active in the UAW politics?
Yes, well, my dad was a UAW member for, well, still is, he's a retiree. He worked on the assembly line building spark plugs for AC spark plug for almost 35 years. And my uncle was in the sit-down strike in Flint in the 1930s.
Uncle Laverne?
Laverne, yes. And did you know him? But he, no, he was, yes, he was in the sit-down strike, and which is, I think this year is going to be the 75th anniversary of that. This strike in Flint really created the UAW, really made the UAW, got its first contract with General Motors, and ignited a labor movement in the 1930s across the country.
Michael Moore, at what point in your life do you remember your sense of political right and wrong come into play?
That's a good question. I had a cousin who lived in New York City, and her dad was a state assemblyman, a Roosevelt Democrat himself. And she would come there, we'd alternate. She would come there one summer to Michigan, and then we would come to New York City. And she was a little older than us. Her name was Pat, and she taught my sisters and I a lot about politics, even at a very young age. I remember first, second grade, she having me memorize John F. Kennedy's inaugural address. And I was able to do it. And by second grade, I mean, this is what was a little freaky about me. There's this little kid wandering around, ask not, and I try to do the accent, ask not, but I'm like, I'm a little tight. Ask not what this country can do for you. So there was very, I don't know. I think if you come out of an Irish Catholic tradition, you can't help but not be engaged in what's going on around you, and also you can't help but not have a sense of humor about it too, because it's the thing that protects you from the all that is. And so yeah, I don't know. I think growing up in Flint, being part of that whole situation.
So you were about 9 years old when JFK was assassinated. Do you remember that?
Yes, I was in fourth. Oh yes, I remember very well.
Do you write about that in Here Comes Trouble?
Yes, yeah. I write about how we were actually watching educational television, and they broke in, and they must have switched over to NBC's coverage, and Chet Huntley was on and announced it. And of course, all the nuns, they took us all over to church, and we were praying so that he would live. 2 days later, I'm sitting on the carpet in the living room at home watching TV, and my mom is vacuuming, and they are bringing Oswald out, and here you are, you're 10 years old, and 9 years old, and you're watching somebody essentially being shot to death live on television. And I remember yelling, Mom, they shot Oswald, and she couldn't hear me because she was vacuuming, and I reached over and I pulled the plug out of the wall, and she was like, what do you, and I said, look at this. And, and she was the kind of mom who, of course, the first thing is like, oh my God, not another, this weekend has already been dark and horrible enough. But it was also my child had to witness this. And how do I explain this? And so, yeah, I've strong memories of all of that.
Michael Moore, 1968, Richard Nixon gets elected. What was your view at that point? Did you care?
Well, actually, I write about this in the book. This is like, this isn't really a tell-all type book, but I do admit that I went campaigning for Richard Nixon. I was in ninth grade, and I'll tell you what happened. I was very much for Robert Kennedy. He was assassinated, then Eugene McCarthy didn't get the nomination. Hubert Humphrey got it, and he and Johnson were responsible for this war. And I just could not get behind Hubert Humphrey. I'm in ninth grade, what do I know? But I just thought, Nixon said he had a secret plan to end the war, and he was going to end it in 6 months, and that sounded good to me. And so I remember going out campaigning, and I was actually going to the seminary at the time. I left home at 14. My parents let me go to the seminary because I wanted to be a priest. And I remember the bishop one day asked me to come over and do some yard work. I think he had heard that I was out campaigning for Nixon. and he wanted to ask me about why are you doing that? And he wanted to educate me about Nixon.